My name is Leggy Alexander, and I am the Food Programs Vista at the Network Feed Success. We are offering this conversation today as part of an ongoing series around after-school meals and the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP, which is part of our Child Nutrition Initiative. You can find more information on the meal program and additional resources on our website at www.networkforyouthsuccess.org. With us today is Emily Chatelain, CEO and founder of the School Food and Wellness Group. The firm supports and consults with programs enrolled in the National School Food Program, or NSLP, as well as the Child and Adult Care Food Program. Please feel free to reach out to her by email. She's happy to answer specific questions, and they offers consulting at no charge to programs and schools looking for guidance and information.
Great.
So, yeah, I'm just going to start off by asking Emily a couple questions to review the Child and Adult Care Food Program. Okay. So, Emily, what is currently out there to help with training on the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP, and learning more about the requirements?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. We work with a lot of different programs and organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, private, et cetera. And a main concern, right, is how do we learn about this program? What's the training? What's out there to kind of help us? And what is out there, the state website, I think it's been actually updated recently, and they list a lot of forms and resources and like PowerPoints and manuals, as well as the USDA website for CACFP. The state will also do some webinars throughout the year. I haven't really seen them do any in-person trainings. And then there's other organizations like, you guys, Network for You Success, that can offer webinars just like this. And we also provide training for our partner organizations. We do a summer training each year to kind of refresh all of our returning organizations, and then for new organizations to kind of just help learn the ropes of the program.
Wow, that sounds very great. Thank you. So what are the qualifications for becoming a CACFP sponsor?
So the main kind of determining factor is if you serve at-risk students or population. So you have to be 50% or more of your enrolled students should be eligible for free and reduced lunch meals, or should be in an area where there's 50% or higher free and reduced lunch students in your surrounding communities. So, for example, if you're a YMCA or a church or an after-school program, you would want to look at the schools that are closest to your location and see what their free and reduced lunch percentage is to see if your area would qualify. The other big determining factor is that you have to provide, some type of enrichment or education during those after-school hours. So it can't just be, like a sports camp or, something to that matter. It has to have some type of educational enrichment program going on.
Thank you. What would you consider an enrichment program, though?
So most, like tutoring, or if you have, like a music program or a science or math program, or, a gardening program, any type of educational program. It's a loose definition with the state. I think it really just says enrichment and or educational. So whenever you apply to become a sponsor, that question is asked. They want to explain what it is that, goes on during your program. And if you can't provide, some type of educational component, then you won't get approved.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And what meals are available in the Child and Adult Care Food Program?
So specifically for the at-risk after-school program, you can do both a snack and a supper, or just a snack or just a supper. If you do both the snack and the supper, the regulation or guidance is that they would need to be 2 hours apart. So let's say you have, an immediate snack for, at 3:30, and then if you still have kids there, at 5:30, you can actually serve them a full supper. I do find that most after-school programs choose one or the other, just because, the kids may only be there for about 2 hours or an hour and a half.
Okay, great. And for these meals, what are the reimbursements, and how should programs budget for them?
Yeah, so the reimbursement, that changes every year. This year, the rates are $3.16 for a supper meal, but you can get an additional 23 cents for cash in lieu of commodities. So if you, sign up for the commodity programs, they'll give you additional 23 cents to use towards your meals. So that's a total of $3.39 for every supper, and then it's 86 cents for snack. And again, that's this year's rate. So each year they go up about 2 or 3%, and that's posted usually in the summer for like what next year's rates will be.
Okay, great. So now we would like to get into specific questions concerning food vendors. Can you describe the procedure when an after-school program contacts you for consultation on obtaining vended meals for their program?
Yeah, so we first look at the program or in the organization and what their eligibility would be, which will help us determine if they can participate or not. So, we'll kind of help do that research of, do you guys qualify? Do you have, the percentages needed? We then help create a budget. This is kind of the key part of this is, everybody says, well, what is this going to cost us? Can we afford to do this? Are we going to lose money? Are we going to make money, et cetera? So we sit down with the school and create a budget. We look at what is your projected number of meals? What is your revenue? What expenses should you plan for? Obviously your meal costs. Do you need any equipment? Is there labor involved? And after we determine that, the program will be viable and all parties are on board, we would then engage with the state to begin the application process and then help the program organization conduct the process to find a vendor, which those two kind of go hand in hand.
Okay. I'd just like to pause if any of the participants would like to ask Emily any questions concerning that process. You can also type in your questions in the chat box. Okay, moving on. What are the steps that an organization should take to hire a vendor to provide meals? Are there any special requirements to be aware of?
Yes, so there's several different things to consider and different routes you would take based on the type of organization you are. So the state has different requirements for public nonprofits versus private nonprofit or private for-profit. If you're a public entity, you can use your own contract to your own contract with a vendor for the meals. And if you're a private company or organization, you have to actually use the state's contract template. That contract template is posted on the state's website, but it's kind of a good rule of thumb to just base it, even if you're a public entity, base your contract with the vendor off of that template, just because it's already created for you. And then the other consideration is that when you're looking to contract with a vendor, because this is a federally funded program, you have to competitively procure your vendor. So you can't just find a vendor that you like and sign a contract with them. There's a process involved. So there's a formal process and an informal process, and this goes for both public or private. And it's based off of the dollar amount of your contract. So if your contract is going to be under $100,000 for the year, then you can do the informal process, which is just getting 3 quotes from 3 different vendors and going with the lowest price. If you determine that your contract size will be over $100,000, then you have to follow the formal process, which is that you need to post an advertisement in a locally circulated newspaper. You have to send the request out to at least 3 vendors. They suggest 3 to 5. Schedule an opening date where vendors will submit proposals, and you will open all of the proposals at a certain date and time. And then you would select, the winning vendor, which would be the lowest, most responsible vendor that you determine. And then you would submit that contract to the state for approval prior to signing it with the vendor. So the state would review everything, come back to you and say, okay, we approve you to, work with this vendor. And a kind of a good rule of thumb is going back a step. Whenever we kind of sat down and you work your budget out for the year, that's when you can really look at, your needs, your program needs, how many meals are you going to need for the year, multiply that out by, about $3 a meal, which is, kind of what the cost would be if you're doing supper. And that will help you determine, are you going to need to do the formal or the informal process?
Thank you. We do have one question. Can you repeat the reimbursement, the cost per meal?
The reimbursement per meal from the state would be a total of $3.39 for supper and 86 cents for snack. But again, that's probably going to go up a little for next year. So that's the current school year.
Great. What is the best way that a program can communicate their requirements to a specific vendor?
Good question. This one's pretty key. You really want to make sure that you're setting up your program for success and that you have found a vendor that can meet your needs. So the best way to do that is to examine your program and answer kind of the following questions. The idea from this is that you're going to create a request or a document that you send out to vendors with all of the parameters of your program so that the vendor can then look and see what are your needs and then base, then they'll figure out what their cost is to meet those needs. So you need to look at, do you have equipment? Do you have a way to heat food on site or keep food cold on site? If you don't, then do you need meals that are delivered hot and ready to serve, right before meal service? Do you have staff available to be able to receive meals kind of in a bulk container and serve the meals, from pans? If not, then you would need prepackaged meals. So you would need meals kind of already portioned out into individual containers that you can just easily hand out to kids. All of these are things you would want to consider and think about and write in your request to a vendor, because obviously that will have an effect on their cost. So, if they're having to deliver meals that are hot, right at 4 o'clock when you're serving them, that'll be a little bit more expensive than if they can just deliver them in the morning and they're cold, and then you have the equipment to heat them once it's time for meal service. Same with bulk service or prepackaged service. It would cost a vendor less to be able to deliver you, a pan of food versus them having to pre-portion it and, pay for all the packaging, et cetera. So it's just all things to kind of consider when you're putting together your request from these vendors.
Thank you so much, Emily. And what if the program has special requests? In this case, CACFP meal guidelines form a special request. So would the program be required to develop sample menus ahead of time?
Yes. So CACFP, right, since it's a federally funded program, it comes with, a lot of rules and regs that you have to follow. One important one being that all of your meals have to meet the USDA meal patterns for both supper and snack. So part of your application to the state to become a sponsor is submitting menus and, documentation showing that the meals you plan to serve are going to meet the requirements. So, another large part of this is the planning to work with a vendor, is that you want to conduct this request for proposal process ahead of time, well before you want to start, so that, you can pick the vendor that fits best with you and that the vendor can provide you these documents. So then when you do your final submission to the state, you now have the vendor's, sample menu for the month that they will be, the meals that they will be bringing, and all of that documentation so that the state can approve you. Now, it's kind of like the cart before the horse. You don't want to enter into a contract with a vendor before you're approved by the state, just in case a glitch comes along and then now you've got this signed contract for all these meals and you don't have a way to pay for them. So that's why you really want to, submit everything over to the state, get their approval, and then sign off with the vendor and say, okay, we've been approved, we've picked the state to start, let's go.
Thank you. Will the food be delivered at the site? Many programs have expressed issues with having to pick up the food themselves.
So this is going to vary and depend on where you're located. I work with a lot of programs and sites in New York City, which there's obviously a lot of vendors, there and capable, and they're kind of based there and they have the capabilities and the delivery system set up. But if you're outside of the city, upstate New York or anywhere else almost in New York, it's just going to depend, what vendors are out there or are in your area that can serve you. It's also going to depend on the size of your program. So if you have, 20 meals a day and you're in somewhat of a remote location, it will be hard to find a vendor that is going to deliver to you every day. That's going to be a huge expense for them. They could maybe do it, but you'll see your price per meal be up at like $4 or $5. Some vendors out there will do, maybe just 2 deliveries a week. So, maybe your menu looks more like it's cold items or it's shelf-stable items that don't need to be delivered every day. But to do that, you would need to have the proper equipment to hold the meals. Another large consideration for different organizations that have, programs out there is to partner up. We really help try and facilitate collaboration with other local after-school programs. So, we've connected with a group of like YMCAs that maybe have 5 sites, and then there's also, a Boys and Girls Club in the area, and there's also, some tutoring going on at school X, Y, and Z, and they all need meals. You can collaborate together, kind of put out one bid to, one request to these vendors, and actually, entice larger or vendors to come to your area if they aren't there already. So instead of going to a vendor and saying, well, we have 20 meals a day, you can kind of go as one entity and say, well, we have 1,000 meals a day, and then work out the deliveries from there, whether it be, to a few drop-off sites, or maybe they're only delivering, twice or 3 times a week. There's a lot of options, to try and consider and work with these vendors. They're usually, they usually try to be very flexible and accommodating. So yeah, there's a lot of different things out there to kind of think outside the box.
That sounds really good. Thank you. On that topic, is it possible then for a vendor to also administer or assist with on-site preparation or serving of meals?
Yes, I have seen vendors be able to provide the staff if the program's big enough. So if you're serving, 200-300 meals a day, then you would want to, it would go back to writing that request for a proposal from vendors, because that's obviously going to affect your costs too, right? If the vendor is just dropping meals off, it's going to be one cost, but if they're actually providing, the labor to help prepare the meals and serve them, it'll be a little bit more expensive. But that's something to consider if you've got a large program. Then you can kind of ask the vendor, what would be your price if you included a person, and then weigh those differences, right? Determine, well, would it be more expensive for us to, have the vendor do it, or should we just hire, somebody part-time or try and do volunteers, et cetera? But it is a possibility. Again, it just kind of, you need to look at the size of your program and if it financially makes sense.
Great. For programs that only serve after-school snack, are there vendors open to contracts where only snacks are provided or vended?
Yes, I'd say yes, especially because snacks can be more shelf-stable under CACFP. So you can have a vendor that may only need to deliver, once a week, twice a week. Snacks can be something simple as, cheese sticks and graham crackers and juice and milk, et cetera. One consideration here, though, is that you will need some type of refrigeration on site because one of the meal components is that snack, you have to have a fruit or vegetable component. So you can have either, fruit juice and or milk. So that would be something that, if a vendor isn't going to be delivering every day, then you need to be able to store fruit juice or milk on site. But yes, I do work with a lot of vendors that just drop off snacks.
Great. And we'll be sure to share those vendors with you at the end of the webinar who do only vended snacks.
Yep.
CACFP requires meals served to be healthy, and menus indicate clearly meal components and beverages served. Will vendors be open to providing menus which state clearly, for example, if the milk served is 1% or 0% milk?
Compliant vendors will do that. So, a big part of this is if you are choosing as an organization to contract out basically this work, it's your responsibility to find a vendor that is compliant, that has done this before, and that is going to be able to provide you with all of the documents needed that the state is going to be asking you for. So you really want to find experienced vendors who can provide all of this documentation, keeping in mind, future audits. There are, smaller catering companies that may, try and do this program, but they're just not that experienced, which it's okay and fine to work with a smaller catering company, but if you don't know a lot about the program and they don't know a lot about the program, it can be the blind leading the blind, so you really do want to try and find a company that has menus that are compliant, that list out, the components, that only serve the 1% or fat-free milk, This is where, again, back to that RFP for the vendor, you would want to write out, explicitly what the vendor must be able to meet, include the CACFP meal pattern requirements, include all of the items that the state will be asking you for. And then that way, if you get, let's say you get 2 or 3 vendors that end up saying, sure, we can provide these meals, you will want to look through what they're giving you to make sure that it's following CACFP. The last thing you want to do, and I've seen a lot, is enter into a contract with a company who, when it comes down to the audit, they really didn't have the proper paperwork and they didn't have the proper portions and components and all of those things, because, again, the state is going to be looking at your organization and they will penalize you for not having been serving the right components and meal patterns. It could result in, a big financial finding. And then, you're looking at having to owe the state back because this vendor that you're working with wasn't compliant. So vendors should be very open to providing those menus and backup documentation. So if you're working with a vendor who can't do that simple requirement, then I would say don't work with them.
Good to know. And my final question, what equipment is needed to properly serve meals? Are there facility requirements?
Yes, this is definitely something you want to take into consideration. Equipment would be needed pending how you're going to operate your program. If you want hot dinners served and you have a vendor that's willing to bring them to you every day, warm and ready to go, then you don't really need equipment. You just need you need to be able to take the temperature and make sure that it's within the safety range, and you'd serve it right away. But if not, then yes, you would need to look into purchasing a milk cooler or, those stainless steel double door refrigerators or a warming oven. All of those things are what you would want to examine well ahead of time, figure out if you do need equipment, give yourself, lead time to purchase that equipment. And then the second thing would be to look at your facility. So can your facility support equipment? I work with a lot of programs who are kind of just like in a classroom, after school, and may not have access to the school's cafeteria, or, they may be in a church that doesn't have upgraded electrical. So all of these things are definitely considerations you want to look at when you're in the planning stage and figure out what you're capable of doing. Another big one is engaging with your local health department. There's different requirements with the health department. If you're going to be, handling food and serving food, there's a lot of requirements that come with that. So, it's all things that you definitely want to look at, talk to somebody who's done it before, and see what's needed. You can lean on the state. They're fairly helpful if you have questions for the state, or if there's other organizations in your community that are already, CACFP sponsored and doing this. There's no sense in recreating the wheel. So most organizations are pretty open to, helping out their fellow neighbors. Ask what did they do? What, did they talk with DOH? Did they need to buy stuff? And then talk to these vendors. A lot of these vendors have been around for a long time, and they can kind of come in and assess your needs, your facility needs, and guide you as well. And then lastly, there's a lot of grants out there that can help with purchasing equipment to improve your program. So that's something that maybe you'll start, smaller, and you don't have much equipment, you need meals certain ways, and then you can, submit for grants, and you can really turn your program into something great. So yes, there's a lot of options out there and a lot to kind of consider when you're putting together your meal plan.
Thank you. We also have, what's that? Oh, we have a question. Would CACFP allow daily 100% juice along with a grain for a snack?
I need to look at the requirements. I know that, like National School Lunch, only 50% of your fruit can be in the form of juice. So I would want to look that up specifically before I gave that answer. I want to say that snack can be all juice. If there's any vendors on this call, and if you know the answer, shout it out. But I do think that you can serve 100% fruit juice each day as your fruit requirement, and then have a grain to go with it.
Thank you, Emily. Actually, for 100% juice, they recommend that juice not be served more than twice a week, and juice would actually count as part of fulfilling the fruit. And for snack, at minimum you only need to meet two of the components. So serving and sweet grains can only be served as snack. Only be served as snacks. So it's not that they would not allow it, but it's recommended that only twice a week and one grain or sugar for snack time.
Yeah, obviously the more fresh fruit you can do is promoted within this program, but I do think it's allowable, but state agencies don't really love to see only fruit juice.
Yeah, that's true. Another question, are the CBO organizations given a list of the vendors?
So this is actually a question I just recently posed to the CACFP State Department in prepping for this webinar to try and find, a list of vendors by area or by region. And they wrote back and said that they very strongly will not provide a list of vendors because they can't give recommendations for one vendor over the other. And they suggested to me to find sponsors in the areas that I was curious about and to ask the sponsors what they do and who they work with. That's obviously very time consuming, so I didn't have time to call every sponsor in the state and ask what they're doing. But we can definitely provide a list of vendors that are certainly in the New York City area, and then I know that some of them do operate outside of the city. There's some national companies, and then there's some local companies like Preferred Meals. They serve all over the state. I think Revolution Foods serves somewhat in half of the state. And then, there's some other smaller vendors. So I think we can definitely put together a list, maybe and post it through Networks Youth Success, maybe.
Yeah, that is something really great that we would love to work on. So I have a list of vendor forms that Emily may have mentioned during the webinar, and they will be provided at the end of the webinar as well as the slides and recording. Also, I would just like to remind everyone that this is the last webinar of a webinar series that we have conducted discussing enrollment, operation, and maintenance of CACFP for after school. And the full series is available on our child nutrition page on our website. So this brings us to the end of the webinar. I just want to thank you again, Emily, for taking time to share your expertise and wealth of knowledge on working with vendors with us.
Yeah, it was my absolute pleasure. And like mentioned earlier, we're You know, we really do try and help organizations join this program. It's a great program to take advantage of. So if anybody has, you know, more specific questions, feel free to email me or visit our website. We're always happy to help and at least just kind of answer some questions and get you started on the right foot.
Great. Thank you so much. Please feel free to reach out to Emily. Okay, well, thank you all for sitting in on the webinar.
Great, thank you. Y'all have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.